Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's little talk. Tonight is going to be about the fifth fundamental. It's going to be about pressure management or regulating the magnitude of pressure through ski-snow interaction, how we can prioritize that, and looking at other fundamentals. With me tonight, I have a guest, is Jim Shaw. I'm very excited to have him. Jim is a dedicated educator with 40 years, 40 plus years on snow, teaching both Alpine and Telmark. He's mostly known as kind of nationally as one of the national team members for the Telmark. Deb recently went to Finland. Was it Finland?
Was Finland.
It was Finland for the last time all the ski instructors in the worldwide got together and presented for that. And I'm proud to say that he's one of my mentors. And every time he speaks, I tend to kind of like stick my ear in, if even if I don't act like I'm interested. And I know he's been at Winter Park a lot, and just trying to get this guy in here will always be a challenge because I know he's got all kinds of demands on his time. So, Jim, thank you for coming in and talking
Well,
about, I think, one of the most important subjects. And just to briefly paraphrase, you did an MA or a webinar on this same kind of topic about 5 years ago. I know
uh,
Benji passed that link to me, and I downloaded it, and it was very eye-opening to me,
hmm,
even back.
yeah, it was in the Rocky Mountain. Asked for that after the ski area shut down in the COVID year.
Yeah.
Around. So it took place sometime around the end of March or early April or something like that. We shut down, I think, on the 14th of March, and so I volunteered to do that. And some of the videos that I asked you to put up will be videos from that because it took me some time to put those videos together to point out what I was talking about. But then as far as that goes, I'm willing to do that with, it doesn't make any difference to me what the other videos are,
Okay.
but they'll give me some points to highlight.
Cool. Cool. Um, yeah. Well, go ahead and take it away. I mean, I got nothing else to say. There's not enough superlatives to talk about you, Jim.
Well, try, you said mentor, you could try friend also. That works
Well,
as
yeah.
well.
I'll be happy to drink a beer with you anytime.
Uh, anyway, I'm looking at the whole list of people. There's a lot of people on the screen. Um, first, for starters, I mean, does anybody have any questions? The fact that I'm here, anything that you want to throw at me immediately?
Can you
That's
hear me?
long enough. Oh, yep. Go ahead.
Uh, Jim, it's always puzzled me since I'm back in the Northeast. What is the major distinction in the ski skills, especially in reference to dirt, between Northeastern and Western skiers?
I didn't say I'd answer the questions. I just asked if you had any.
I'm totally
Um,
befuddled by that. That's why I asked.
well, I don't know if I understand the question well enough to be totally honest with you, Gay. But what I will say is that based on what I want to present tonight, and go into, there is no
Hmm.
difference.
Okay.
Um, and I'll explain that in just a second. But first, I'm going to leave the door open because somebody did actually ask a question. So I'm wondering if anybody else is going to. All right. So then I am going to jump in, and it is on what Chuck mentioned. And so, if you think about the five Alpine technical fundamentals, and just I can spell them out almost verbatim, but just doing it in a quick and easier way, just to say in order, in the order that they're listed in. It's important to know that they're bulleted and not numbered. Right. So I know and I know this for a fact, is that when they were put together, they were bulleted and not numbered because they were not tried to be looked at in a priority order. And the question of the prioritizing and so on, that Chuck mentioned was a question that I struggled with for a long time. And as I started looking at the fundamentals, I think it's interesting that, you know, the first one has to do with fore aft, the second one has to do with side to side. The third one has to do with controlling the edge angle, and the fourth one has to do with growing the rotation of the skis. I think I got those in order, right? And I think that there's a piece where maybe even the fifth one, at times in my mind, would be better broken into two. And I don't know how many of you have heard this adage about 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 = 5, right? And what that refers to, you know, is just simply that the way in which you control the pressure front to back, side to side, and the rotation and the edging of the skis determines what the ski snow interaction is going to be. And I have a belief, you know, I don't know if this will ever happen, and it doesn't really matter that it does or doesn't, but is that it's almost as though it would be better to be reworded in such a way that that what you're really regulating is the ski snow interaction, you know. And so in Gay's question about the difference between two different geographic areas, which I don't remember what they were, I could throw it on the table and say, in my belief, every single person that's here, making the assumption every person that here is a skier or a snowboarder or a rider or a telemarker or, you know, in a lot of ways, even a cross country skier, but making the assumption that everybody's doing that, when we start from the top of the mountain and work down, and every person that you see, everybody is doing the same thing. That doesn't mean they're all moving the same way, but they're all trying to manage their ski snow interaction. In other words, what am I doing that creates some sort of a relationship, an interaction, you know, a force between the snow and the skis that causes you to be able to go where you want, when you want, at the speed you want. But that's what we're all trying to do. And if you look at it from that perspective, the question becomes one of, what am I doing with my fore aft? What am I doing with my side to side? What am I doing with my rotation and my edging to be able to create the interaction that I'm looking for so that I can go where I want, when I want, at the speed I want? But that's the question, you know. And the thing about that fifth bulleted fundamental that's interesting, I think, is that a lot of times it's looked at from the standpoint of, in places like moguls, you know, about how the bump pushes on your ski or the bump falls away from your ski and you have this pressure that increases and decreases, you know, and that works if you're going in a straight line. You don't have to be making turns to make that happen. It'll work in a straight line, right? And that may not, that sort of idea about pressure control may not really pertain to the ski snow interaction in the same way, but it is a form of ski snow interaction. By the same token, every time somebody starts down the hill and they employ some sort of an edge angle through the snow because of side cut on skis and so on, it's going to create a ski snow interaction, and the skis are going to start, the snow is going to push back against the skis. And if they rotate their skis, it's going to determine where the skis are pointed when that ski snow interaction takes place. And if they affect their relationship laterally, it's going to affect whether the ski snow interaction takes place more on the inside ski, the outside ski, or both skis. And if they change their position fore and aft, it's going to affect whether the ski snow interaction takes place more on the front of the skis or the back of the skis or in the center of the skis. But that's what I mean when I say 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 = 5. Those four things are contributing to how the skis are interacting with the snow. You know, the ski snow interaction itself, it may be affecting those first four things, but for the most part, the ski snow interaction is the result of what we're getting. You know, and when Chuck was talking about, you know, the webinar and watching it and listening to it and all the accolades that he gave me, thank you very much, by the way, but all that stuff. All that was going through my mind is maybe this is the world according to Garp, or maybe it's the world according to Jim. I don't know how you want to look at it, but that is how I view what's happening. I'm looking and going, what are the skis doing on the snow? What's the interaction that's taking place? And that's what I'm searching for. And this is a piece that I mentioned to Chuck in our email conversation that's taken place over the last month. Because I have another view of this that I think is really important, and that has to do with the idea of the real versus the ideal. And if that makes any sense, I know that makes sense to some people, but I don't know if it makes sense to everybody. So what I mean is, what's really happening on the snow when somebody's skiing? That's the real part. But then there's an ideal part. And the ideal part is, what is it you think should happen when they're on the snow? What are you trying to get people to do? And that part is not at all a given. In other words, I think there's a PSIA perspective on that. I think, and I'm not totally sure that's even true. But what I mean by that is, when we watch the ski-snow interaction, we make a comparison between the ski-snow interaction that we see and the ski-snow interaction that we think we would like to see. And, when I watch, for instance, World Cup racers, and the best example I think of a World Cup racer, and Chuck, if you happen to pull, I didn't mention this to you the other day. I did mention that I think this shows up best in really high level skiing on really, really good skiers. But the best example I thought was when Marcel Herscher was at the height of his career. He would employ the stivot. In other words, he would come into a gate, he would rotate his skis, and he would let the skis drift sideways for a long period of time, a relatively long period of time, and then he would hit his edges, tip his skis on edges, create a huge amount of pressure all at once, and get them off of them as quick as he possibly could. Which sounds a lot like a level 5 skier making a Z-shaped turn and skidding. And I go, oh, that's okay, Marcel. We can fix you. We've got a load of ski instructors all across the United States that know exactly how to make that better. All right. But you look at it and go, well, what's his goal? It's like he's not trying to slow down. He's trying to keep his momentum going down the hill as much as possible, and his athletic ability would allow him to do that. Sometimes when I do that, I can't hang on to it. It's like, nope, that doesn't work for me. It just works for him. So he has a sort of different ideal than I might have, as far as just simple things like turn shape. Another thing that I hope Chuck is going to put up is sort of a turn shape or movement analysis. I don't know what you call it, a model or a checklist kind of thing. But I think that what I'm going to say has to do with that checklist a little bit. And so the idea that the turn has to be round, I think, is not really an accurate term or an accurate way to look at it. I would say that that when people are turning, round turns are easier to manage and control, generally speaking, but they may not give you the outcome that you're looking for. So in other words, the idea that the turn has to be round to be ideal, that doesn't sit well with me. Although I spend 99.9% of my time trying to make round turns and teaching round turns. That's so that I can manage things in a way that I see as effective. But you hear it, again, going back to World Cup, you hear it sometimes. My favorite announcers are the ones that say they're not taking enough risk. And the risk means they're not going straight enough and late enough, and then trying to hit the edges as fast as they possibly can and get out of the turn and let it go. Because that's speed. But if they can't hang on to it, it doesn't work. So anyway, this goes back to the piece I was saying about the ideal. I don't think the ideal is a given, right? And the question always has to be asked is that interaction that you see with the skis on the snow from this skier the interaction that skier is looking for? Or is it an interaction that's causing the outcome that skier is looking for? And most of the time when we teach and train, give clinics and give lessons and so on, I believe that that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look for the outcome people are looking for, or the outcome that they need to accomplish, say to pass a certification exam, to win a race, to ski better in the moguls. And all those outcomes are not necessarily the same. Competition mogul skiers, for instance, the way in which they take a direct line down the hill doesn't always fit the way that we teach bumps in PSIA. However, it's a very effective way to get down the hill in a hurry. right? And score well in a mogul competition. But they're getting the interaction maybe they're looking for. So in other words, I think it's important to look and go, not just what is the interaction, but is the interaction that you're seeing the interaction that you're looking for? And then what do I change in those other fundamentals to get a more desired outcome, a more desired interaction? That's essentially how I see things. Right. And so I think Chuck's going to put up some videos. Is that correct, Chuck?
I got some videos. I got a Marcel
Okay.
Herscher if you want to go start with that one.
No, I don't. I want to start with the two that I gave you that I put together.
Not a
But
problem.
I do want to open the door. If anybody has any questions at the moment, I'm going to leave that open for what I just said. And then I want to put on some video and try to point out some of the things that I'm talking about.
I got one right now from Joanne. That's she says, I often think about what my legs need to do. Type is turn shape, as I always predict a terrain as I enter. Can you address, I'm going to assume, regulating pressure with this mindset? And she says,
Read that to me again, please.
it's a little, yeah.
Oh, it's in the chat. It's in the chat, right?
It's in the chat. I often think about what my legs need to do, type of turn shape, as I always predict the terrain I enter. Can you address pressure in this mindset?
I can. And maybe, it's good that you ask questions like this because it might jump me ahead a little bit on what I'm saying. And I'm going to give my disclaimer on this one. Like I said, this might be the world according to Jim. So I got to be a little careful when I say this. But the way that we move fore and aft along our skis, like I said, can affect what part of the ski is interacting with the snow at any given time. And the same thing, the fundamental control the pressure from ski to ski and direct pressure towards the outside ski. There's reasons for that we want pressure to be directed to the outside ski. But the inside edge or the outside edge of the inside ski has the same shape to it as the inside edge of the outside ski. In other words, if you're standing too much on the inside ski, the uphill ski, that edge has the same shape as the other ski that you are supposed to be standing on. All right. So what's the difference? It's like, well, the truth is the outside ski works better for a number of reasons. It's easier to control. Eversion is stronger than inversion. It's more in the center of your body. It's less to the edge, things like that. Right. So there are reasons for doing that. But that determines where you are between those two skis. The rotation piece, as you enter whatever line and whatever condition you're in, right? The rotation doesn't control. This is a strong statement, but I believe it's true. The rotation doesn't control the direction you're going to travel in at all. Right? All it does is create the steering angle, the direction in which the skis are pointed in relation to your current direction of travel, right? And when the skis are either pressured or edged at that steering angle, right, it's going to control what the skis do, right? So the more, like, if I looked at this entire group and we were standing on snow right now and said, here's what we're going to do. We're on your average blue run. Not a Taos blue, Scott. That would be just a green run. All right, for you. But we're standing on your average blue run, and we're all going to go straight down the hill for 100 yards. Right, and then we're going to turn our skis to a 90-degree angle with relatively flat skis, and we are going to dig our edges in as hard as we can possibly get away with it. And most of the people in the group, with very few exceptions, are going to look at me and go, "You go first." It's like, I'm not doing that. All right. Why? It's because what we've created is a 90-degree steering angle, basically a 90-degree angle to our direction of travel, and then try to create a lot of edge. However, if I said go down the hill for 100 yards, turn your skis 10 degrees, and then tip them on the edge, you go, okay, I might be willing to do that. All right. So the rotation actually controls where the skis interact with the snow. All right. The amount of edge that you tip the skis up onto creates the intensity of the interaction, assuming that they're pressured. Where you are fore and aft, or which ski you're on, determines your ability to manage that pressure, or where along the length of the ski that pressure is going to take place. That's what I'm actually trying to trying to say about this, right? So that's why I say all these first four things, to me, they're just pieces that do that. So going back to the question, you know, I think what my legs need to do, type of turn shape, as I always predict the terrain. I think we always all do that. So in other words, we look and go, what do I want my skis to do? And if I use too much rotation and then edge them, the angle at which they're interacting with the snow is not effective, unless I'm trying to stop or I'm trying to get an extreme reaction. On the other hand, if the angle is a little bit less, I might get a general reaction, but I don't get the skis to come around as fast. You know, if I affect where the pressure is on the skis, either ski to ski or fore aft, I get different parts of the ski to interact. So that's how I'm looking at that. All right, and the interaction is definitely the thing that creates the pressure. And I didn't say this earlier, but I think this is a really important statement to make. And my apologies to people if it affects the, you know, if the hair rises on the back of your neck when I start talking about centrifugal forces and centripetal forces and things like that. But essentially what happens when you make a turn is the snow has to push against your skis. You know, the simple idea that you will not, and this isn't my opinion, by the way, you know, Isaac Newton knew this 500 years ago or 700 years ago, whatever he was, 600 years ago. You will not change direction, right, once you start down the hill, unless there is an outside force that affects you, that pushes you and makes you go somewhere. That outside force is created through the ski snow interaction. So when I'm looking at a turn and I'm determining where I want to go and what's the best outcome, what I'm trying to do is figure out what outcome is going to get me to where I want to be, at the speed I want to be, when I want to be there, and how do I use these first four fundamentals, you know, the rotation and the edging and the pressure along the length and ski to ski, to get me to where I want to be, right? And no, I don't go through that process. I mean, I don't go through that expanded process that I just mentioned each time, but that's what we're teaching people to do, and that's what we're figuring out. And when you find yourself not getting there, not at the speed you want, not at the time you want, and things aren't working out, it's like, I need to change something here because I'm not getting the ski snow interaction I'm looking for. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, but that's how I see it.
Very cool.
I know it was a long-winded way to say it, but I hope it makes sense.
So Gay indicated that maybe that little discussion that you have may have, you know, answered the question she had earlier about what's the difference between what's happening in the Rocky Mountains versus the East. And she says maybe there's a different mix of skills from someone in the Rockies than from someone in the East because they have different demands that they have to meet.
Absolutely. And that part I will completely agree that there are frequently different blends you're looking for to get the interaction you're looking for in different places. You know, and the idea that, for instance, the idea that all the speed control, you know, on a steep, icy slope that's going to fit within the realm of the skiing that I wish to do is going to come through a turn that's more carved with a perfectly round turn shape, just may not be realistic.
No,
I may look at this and go, I'm going to need to get more braking action towards the finish of the turn, more of a short swinging kind of thing. And that doesn't mean that the next guy can't do it better than I can. I'm certain that Marcel and Michaela can do it better than I can. And they might be able to blend in a different way, right? But that may change from east to west. The same thing is true. I mean, I grew up in the East, so I remember my first experience, you know, in deep snow. Well, it wasn't my first experience in deep snow. My first experience in Colorado in deep snow, you know, and the idea that I was going to do that eastern turn where I'm going to pivot my skis and have my skis, you know, interact with the snow later in the turn. It's like, yeah, that's not happening. You know, they just hung up in the powder, and it's like, how come I'm still going straight? You know, so yeah, there was a different blend that was required. And that wasn't a blend that I was used to get the interaction. The interaction I was looking for was not to go straight or longer, right? And I found out that what I was looking for wasn't necessarily going to work out. So, yeah, that along those lines, different blends are going to apply in different places in different conditions. As far as are all skiers looking to manage that interaction, I think yes. The answer to that question is yes. Even if they don't know they're looking for that, that's what they're trying to do.
All right, you ready for some video?
I am.
All right. All right, sick of listening to yourself?
I don't hear anything I say.
All right, here is the famous Jonathan Blue video that's been modified by Jim. Everybody that's been part of this group has, for a while, has seen this video because this is like the most uber accurate thing in the world.
I can actually show you some mistakes if you want to see them.
Oh, I'm sure you could, yes.
They're pretty small. I've told Jonathan I thought this is some of the most inspirational skiing I've ever seen.
Yes. It's number one on my hit list.
Just because it's so clean.
Just, it's impossible is what I like to call it.
So you're welcome to put me on mute if you don't want to listen to what I'm saying. But as you watch Jonathan, the green and the red arrows are what I tried to use to point out, where do I see the skis interacting with the snow? Where do I see them engaging? Where do I see them releasing? And it's also important to know that when I watch for that, it's not an absolute thing. I mean, it's not as absolute as I think that we would like it to be. So in other words, go again, Chuck.
Oh yeah, it's
and see if you can stop it for a moment when he's coming at us, like right here at the point where the skis are the most flat on the snow, just close.
Most flat on the snow?
Yeah, right in the middle of the transition.
Hold on. Right about.
Just so I can chat for a second on this particular spot.
His ability to switch edges is kind of like, oh, there you go.
Okay, that's fine. Now you're on a little bit of a bump in there that we never noticed before, but so when you go to those green and red arrows, the red arrow being the release, this is somewhere after the release, right, and prior to the engage arrow. So, and I'm talking through this so that when we watch and we see the arrows again, it'll make sense. So I also see skiing from the standpoint of the whole 3-phase turn shape model. Is that what it's called? 3-phase turn model.
Right.
With initiation, shaping, and finish.
Mm-hmm.
The shaping. Let me start with the initiation to make this easier. So the initiation is the part that's taking place somewhere around where Jonathan is, to the point where the snow starts to push back against the skis enough that it's making the snow is moving him through the turn more than he's just drifting sideways or drifting forward. In other words, something's actually happening in that ski snow interaction that is forcing him to change direction. Right? The release is the part at the finish of the turn where you try to decrease that force against the snow so that the snow is no longer pushing you in the old direction around the previous curve. Right? And so I also kind of think of the shaping phase being the part where the ski snow interaction is causing the skier to change direction. It's not just gravity, or momentum or whatever it is, right? It's actually the fact that you've put your skis in a relationship to the snow so that the snow will push against your skis and make you change direction, regardless of where gravity's pulling you and your momentum is taking you and everything else. You're creating a new force. And so I have to stop there because I also see skiing I said, it's kind of like an idea of you're moving from one shaping phase to another shaping phase. First we're turning, and then we stop turning, right? And then we prepare ourselves to start turning the other way, and then we go the other way. So we're in one shaping phase of a turn, and then we're going to stop being in the shaping phase, and we're going to try to get ourselves in a shaping phase going the other way, right? That part where we're stopping all that, that's the whole part that takes place between the release and the engagement. And the reason I say that it's not absolute is that anytime the skis are on the edge a little bit and the snow is pushing a little bit, they may not be engaged enough to have the force be significant, but it's taking place a little bit. But it builds to the point where all of a sudden they really grab. And if you think in your own skiing about doing that as you go from edge to edge, you'll know there's that point when all of a sudden you feel the snow start to grab this, push against your skis, and it starts taking you off in a new direction. That's the feeling I'm talking about. That's the piece I'm waiting for. All right. And so I asked Chuck to stop because Jonathan's right in between those two places of where the forces were pushing him on a left turn, and he's getting ready to have them push on a right turn. Now you can click on the go. So it's that time. He's waiting, and there you see the skis start to engage. And when I say he's waiting, that doesn't mean he's not doing anything. It just means he's trying to use the other fundamentals to get himself. So right there, the snow will start to push against the skis. And that's where I tried to make these red and green arrows right there somewhere. You can see it where it starts to move them more than just gravity and momentum. So he's starting to let go, and then they're going to re-engage, and he's going to start to take off in a new direction. Like I said, the red and green arrows are the pieces. There were my best efforts at trying to give a pinpoint a spot, but that spot doesn't actually take place in an exact spot. It takes place as the skier is preparing to make this happen. Then all of a sudden you can feel the skis hook up and they take off in a new direction.
Has anybody got any questions?
Go to the next one, Chuck.
All right, Josh.
I'm not going to spend nearly as much time talking about this, but I'll try to show the same thing. Definitely a different turn. What I will say is look where the skis are pointed almost every time that the green arrow comes on.
At the apex.
Yeah, they're kind of, the skis are pointed down the hill at what we sort of call the apex of the turn. You know, and this is it titled on the slide there somewhere, Chuck? It's a short swing.
It's a short swing, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
Josh short swing.
It's a modern short swing, so it's it's on shaped skis and it's more round. It takes place very quickly. But an interesting point is that what I would contend is that in Josh's skiing right here, that the beginning of the shaping phase is very close to the fall line. You know, and the thing I said about real versus ideal early on, in other words, if we looked at somebody and said, well, they're not really engaging the skis and the shape, and they're, or they have a very short shaping phase. In a sense, this is a short shaping phase.
Mm-hmm.
And there's rotation of the legs from the release to the engagement, release to the engagement, right? Because if he engaged a lot of the ski too much before that, it would elongate the turn and not give him the outcome he's looking for. So the idea that the shaping phase has to start in the standard ski instructor picture, it's shaping phase starts, just after the finish or just after the initiation when the skis are still pointed across the hill. That's the part I meant about real versus ideal. It's like, what's the outcome you're looking for here? And I think his turn shape outcome that he's looking for is one that he has to provide some rotational input to get the skis to point into a new direction before he engages them too much, or this turn is going to elongate more than he wants. Or the speed is going to run away from him because it's going to become a very down the hill railroad tracky thing, a very quick railroad track. I see the questions in the chat about, is it sort of a Z-shaped turn? And my answer to that question is yeah, absolutely. More Z-shaped than we think of in, what we call good skiing, right? But that's why I said, Chuck says he does have a video of Marcel Herscher to put up, and so I'm looking forward to seeing the video of Marcel Herscher.
But that's the outcome he's trying to achieve.
Yes, absolutely.
We call these Midwest medium radius.
Otherwise, you'd be at the bottom before you get done with the second one.
We got a 30-yard wide hill with 400 people on it, and it's only a quarter mile long. Again, as many turns as we can.
Well, I think that Josh could create more engagement higher in the arc of the turn. But if he did that and got a more carved turn, it would take him down the hill at a much higher rate of speed.
Mm-hmm.
You could have the same corridor and a higher rate of speed and have a more carved turn. So I think that he, and I've actually listened to Josh talk about that. I can't remember what he told me, but he told me about all the things he did wrong in this video. So, but it's pretty damn good skiing, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
I would love to see the video of Marcel.
All right, I got him, and I've also got Lindsey Vonn too.
So the interest is this in a GS?
This is slalom.
Slalom?
Yeah, it's not the best. It's not like what I would like to see high res, but it does show the ski snow interaction happening very, very quickly, and as we would turn, probably pretty late in the turn, all at once.
Yeah, you can see the skis on that turn. They weren't even on the ground till the fall line. Can you play this at full speed?
No, this is full speed.
Really? I thought he skied faster than that. There's a beautiful example of the stivot right there, that last turn that you just stopped.
Yeah.
I'd like GS even better if there was a GS full speed, but you can see that, as he comes around, little aft for a moment there. But there's the hard edge at the end.
Mm-hmm. Just the speed. Right.
There's the same thing. You see a pivot and then an edge. Bit of a pivot and then an edge. In a sense, like I said, I love to compare it to there you go, same kind of deal. The skis turn a whole bunch and then the edges engage. And I like to compare it to, it's like, yeah, he's like a level 6 skier, coming down the Ballou trail. That's what we see all the time. They get this Z-shaped turn in which the skis pivot a whole lot and they engage late in the turn. But the people that we watch and we work with who make that sort of a move, their goal is not to get down the hill as fast as possible. Whereas I'm pretty sure Marcel's goal right here is to get down the hill as fast as possible. And if he can spend more time traveling down the hill and less time going sideways, and still be able to hang on to what he's done, that's what helps. And he's obviously been very successful at that. So I think some of these things about the ideal outcomes and what you're actually trying to do show up better when you watch really high level skiers, because they don't always do what it is that we're trying to get people to do, but their goals aren't always the same. You see the same thing in free ride skiing. See that, there you go, right there. Look how much the skis turn. Look how much they turn before they engage. And by the way, it's not always true. Sometimes they engage and they almost railroad track through certain gates. I'm sure Chuck's not going to pull it up because he doesn't know what, I don't know which one it is. There's a good one where you see that kind of thing happen. There's another same kind of thing. See how the skis are changing direction and then they're engaging? Right there and right there.
It's almost
that's
like
the
he's
goal.
throwing sideways.
Yeah, it looks like he's doing something that we would never teach somebody to do.
Go sideways.
Yeah, twist the skis, rotate the skis sideways, and then put the edges in as hard as possible. But I remember watching a video of Michaela. I think it was in one of the dual slaloms, and she was behind a little bit, coming about 6 skates from the finish, and the course sort of it opened up so that it was fairly straight, and then you watched her just all of a sudden start to railroad track, and she just railroad tracked through the last 4 to 6 gates or something like that. It's like she's going to lose. She's going to win. One of those kind of deals. And I think that if these World Cup racers could railroad track through the course and not go sideways at all, they would, but they can't. They can't hang on to that when they try to do that, and that's when they go for too much. That's the statement, once again, Michaela made in her second Olympics when she said, I went for too much. In other words, she tried to go too straight, too fast, too hard, and she couldn't hang on to it. And she needed to back off a little bit to go faster. So those are the kind of things that I think you see. It's like, what's the ideal? What is it you actually want to have happen?
This is Lindsey probably later, but she made her bones in slalom first before she became the greatest American downhiller.
See how the skis haven't engaged yet? They're starting to engage. They're starting to do something. And all of a sudden, you'll see them start to really push her in the new direction right in there somewhere. I watched her run a slalom in Winter Park when she was like 14 or 16. Again, you see the skis, they're changing direction. The direction the skis are pointed in is changing, but the direction of the skier isn't changing yet.
It's the center edges first.
And she's changing. In other words, she's using the rotational component to determine where she wants the skis to be pointed when they engage with the snow and create the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And if it allows her to travel more down the hill and maintain more speed, that's what she wants. In other words, go where you want, when you want, at the speed you want. Well, the speed she wants is as fast as possible, as fast as she can possibly hang on to. The where and when is just to get around the gates with as much speed as possible. But you can see the skis are changing direction a little bit. And then they start to engage. So anyway, that's why I said you can see this in upper level skiers. But it's that snow, when all that snow starts to fly off her skis,
That's when she's edging.
That's when she's edging and creating an interaction. The snow is starting to push back. So it's not pushing back yet. But the skis are still changing direction. It's not really pushing back. It's starting to push back there. And then it really starts to engage. And all of a sudden you'll see her now she starts to move in a considerably new direction. That's the ski snow interaction. That's what she's trying to manage. And if she starts that interaction too high in the arc of the turn, she'll actually go slower. It'll be round and smooth. I've listened to racers. If one more person tells me I'm smooth in the race course, I'm going to hit him. Like, I don't want to be smooth. I want to be fast.
Yeah.
All right.
Ready for some less than?
Sure.
I volunteered myself.
Hey, I'll let you can watch the video and listen to me just a little bit. But I am going to make one other contention. I think one of the things, actually, Chuck, pause the video for just a second,
All right.
just so I can say this piece. I think that one of the things that we do as ski instructors is teach people most of the time, if not, I don't know about all the time, but most of the time, we teach people to make not necessarily round turns, but definitely rounder turns. So in other words, as the turn is rounder, as the ski snow interaction takes place around a greater part of the curve. So at the end of one turn, the skis are pointed across the hill. At the end of the next turn, they're going to be pointed in the other direction across the hill. And when I say across, I mean, maybe it's 45 degrees across, maybe it's 90, whatever it is. As they make that turn rounder, they increase their ability to manage that ski snow interaction, the pressure buildup that's pushing back against their skis. When it happens all at once, like we just watched Marcel Herscher and Lindsey Vonn, a race coach I had years ago in Winter Park said to me, this is back when Alberto Tomba was racing. He said, if you want to hold Tomba's line, you got to have Tomba's strength. And I've stood next to Tomba. He's got legs that are the size of 55-gallon drums. It's like, well, I'm not that strong. So I can't go at the gate in the same way that he could and hang on to that. Right. And I'm pretty sure that I couldn't do what Lindsey did or what Marcel Herscher did. No matter how well even if I dialed in the movements to get exactly what the response that they were after was, I still don't know that I could hang on to what I've created. But if I engage the ski a little higher in the arc of the turn and create a little rounder shape, I can spread that interaction over a longer period of time. The technical term for that is the work that it takes place to get the skis to go from one direction to the other. And work is force over time or force over distance. I don't know. There's probably a physicist in the group somewhere that could know that for sure. But anyway, if I spread that force over a period of time and distance throughout a turn, I don't have to do all the work in such a short period of time. So I think what we do is we teach people to make rounder turns, to have that work take place, over a period of time, which allows it to be more manageable, which allows us to do more of what we want, where we want, when we want, at the speed we want. So anyway, I wanted to interject that little piece because I'm not at all encouraging us to go out and go. Jim did this MA video and he said we should all be making Z turns. That's not actually what I'm saying. All right. But anyway, let's go back to Chuck's video.
Not if you want to pass an exam, anyway.
No, you got to be careful. Like I said, this might be the world according to Jim. So. Midwest mediums, is that what we're doing here, Chuck?
Those are Midwest long radius, yes. These are from a couple of years ago. I've learned some stuff since then. So kind of back to the topic of the day, which is, I'm enjoying everything that you're saying and hanging on all the words.
Oh, I'm gonna do some MA on you in just a second.
All right, cool. So I'm not as it. We want to go back to that kind of like that prioritization piece.
Oh, I'm gonna do that in just a second.
All right, perfect.
And this video is as good as it gets, by the way.
That's why I love you, Jim. Hold back.
So the thing that stands out to me,
Too much up and down.
and I've worked as I've been on the national team for telemark, but I've worked as an alpine examiner for in excess of 20 years. And Chuck said they're Midwest long radius turns. I don't know what that means. They look kind of like Rocky Mountain short radius turns, but maybe a little on the long side.
They're SRTs.
Yeah. And so when I watch this, the thing that stands out first to me, all right, is just plain and simply that the majority of the ski snow interaction, the place where I see the snow pushing against the skis, and I see that a lot through the snow flying, is considerably after the fall line.
Right.
It's right there, right there, right? In a sense, he's doing some of the same things that Lindsey Vonn was doing, right? But in a short radius turn that we'd be looking at, you know, as a ski instructor here, I would like to see him create interaction much higher in the arc of the turn. Simply saying, and I know this, like I said, as a longtime Rocky Mountain Alpine examiner, if you can't get the skis to interact with the snow prior to the fall line, you're probably not going to pass your short radius turns. All right, and so trying to make that happen, I'm gonna throw a quick story about this because I think it's really interesting, and it has to do with that 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 = 5. So I was doing an MA clinic indoor on video, and we had a skier up, and somebody in the group, you know, asked about where you saw the skis tipping on edge, right? And an individual in the group said, I think the skis are tipping on edge prior to the fall line, prior to when they're in the apex or pointed down the hill in the fall line. And another person said, I think the skis are tipping on edge after the fall line.
Because of the powder.
Well, no. And I looked at the video and I looked at both of the people that said that, as well as 20 other people in the room. And I said, I think you're both right. And the most fun part was to watch the people in the back of the room that were falling asleep all of a sudden perk up. All right. It's like, how can they be tipping their skis on the edges before and after the fall line? All right. And how can they both be right? And the answer is that the skis may actually, like, I think that if you watch Chuck, if he stops you in just the right place, you could see that his skis actually right there are tipped on edge before the fall line, but they're not engaging and creating an interaction until after the fall line. Right there, they're on edge already, but very, very little engagement or interaction is being created. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense as I say it. I realize I'm asking that to 40 people. So in other words, what I heard in that session that I was talking about, the indoor video session, was one person saw where the skis were going on edge and one person saw where the skis were interacting. And just the language that they were using may not have been consistent, but what they were both seeing was correct in the way that they were talking about it. But what I'm looking for in Chuck skiing is where are the skis interacting with the snow in such a way, watch how his skis all of a sudden kind of not very good at this angle, but they interact and then you see him all of a sudden kind of take off or jump across the hill, like right there. I'll wait till you go back to the start. You can see it much more when you're coming at us.
Yeah, I can go back that far.
Well, just let it go.
Is that
Right there.
pivot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of snow flying right at the moment, but I think there is going to be in the next frame or two. There you go. That's where the interaction's taking place. And there's a little snow starting to move, and there's a small amount of interaction taking place.
But nothing like what,
But nothing, yeah, nothing like what's going to happen right in there. Like I said, that angle's not very good to really see where his skis are exactly pointed. But that's what I'm looking at. I'm not just looking at where they're tipped on the edges. I'm looking at where are they engaging with the snow and creating that interaction. Right. And so looking at Chuck, and I'm also fond of, when I talk about movement analysis, I'm fond of saying that I think 90% of your movement analysis can be done before you see the skier. And when I say that, what I mean is that if you know what the ideal that you're looking for is, then all you're really asking is how is he different than the ideal? And so as I'm watching Chuck right there, I'm not making the observation, and I'm going to go through the other fundamentals. I'm not making the observation that Chuck is in the back seat. Right? But based on the interaction you're getting, I would tell you that the front half of the ski is not engaging with the snow high enough in the arc. All right. You may be getting pressure to the outside ski right there. All right. But if you want to make that turn rounder, the front half of the ski has to make sure it's engaged right in the beginning. And the rotational control piece needs to slow down, right, in the first half of the turn to give the skis time to engage with the snow, first in the front half of the ski and then the whole ski as soon as the front half is engaged. And that has to happen. So the edging skill has to take place sooner in relation to the rotational skill. Wow, that's good. Work equals force times displacement measured in joules.
Thank you, David.
Well, I had to
It was-
put that in there as one of the engineers of the group. I've dealt with work a ton, so I felt like, yep, I'm pretty sure I know what this is. Had to verify, but I figured I might as well at least put that in there.
Well, that was from a guy who was doing a clinic with the folks from Los Alamos National Laboratory. And one of the physicists looked at me and said, the term you're looking for is work. And so I really appreciated that because it makes sense. But anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that right at the moment. I'm interested to know. So I'm watching Chuck ski right there, and I made some comments about it. But I have no way of knowing if any of the comments that I'm making right there, how they sit with people. And I'm actually throwing that out to the group right at the moment.
I don't know. I like it. To me, we always talk about, and it's a bit pat, but we always talk about that person needs early edging and early pressure. But why? And your explanation now makes a little bit more sense as to why we always harp on early edging, early pressure.
I agree. It's to create the engagement higher in the arc of the turn so that the work can be spread out more of the way around the curve. And I also think there's a piece in the way that I described Chuck skiing right there that I think is really important. And that's, we often think of the way that we describe things in relation to time, right? And we're like, I'm kind of making an assumption here, but everybody has done some sort of an exercise in teaching skiing or taking a lesson or whatever it has been, in which you've done some kind of a patience turn or some kind of a turn in which you count, in the first half, like you count till you get to the fall line, or you're trying to be patient to the fall line. And that takes into place sort of the time and distance piece. But what I was saying about Chuck is that it may not be necessarily that when I said that you could be a little aft here, he may not actually be aft. He just may be late to getting to where he needs to be. In other words, the skis have turned a lot before the front half is engaged. And that can allow the back half of the ski to not have pressure because it's already in the fall line when it engages. And you get more of a Z-shaped turn. So in other words, how does one skill relate to another skill? And so the skill or the fundamental, like I can see you're at the top of the turn, when your skis are across the hill, Chuck, and you start to move into the new turn, I can see your inside ski even be lifted off the ground at times, even if it only, clears a snowflake or two.
Sure.
But you're definitely directing pressure to the outside ski. But the edging skill, the edging component, and where along the length of the ski the edging is taking place isn't happening until closer to the fall line. In other
100%.
words, the pressure is not in the front half of the ski, and the edge engagement hasn't been enough that the pressure, in other words, pressure on the outside ski without an edge engagement, or directing the pressure along the length of the ski, or a blend between edging and rotational control, doesn't necessarily give you what you're looking for. So you have pressure directed to the outside ski, but it's not giving you the interaction you're looking for high enough in the arc of the turn. So which fundamental is going to give you that interaction, right? And my answer to that question is slowing down the rotational control piece. In other words, not letting the skis turn as much, and creating more edge angle higher in the arc of the turn before the skis change direction, the direction in which the skis are pointed, not the direction in which you're traveling.
So less of Josh Fogg.
That, you mean that's what you're doing?
Well, I mean, it's the Midwest thing, right?
Oh.
Short swings are my jam.
Uh-huh.
So trying to defeat that was really, really difficult.
Well, if you could, okay, I didn't think about it that way. Maybe what you need to do is cut your radius in half.
Yeah. Oh no, I had
Make
to
your
make
cord,
I had to
make
make a
your cord
fundamental
or
change in my
make your cord.
thinking as well as in my skiing.
Uh-huh.
So, and it really was achieved through a hell of a lot of outside ski turns and allowing the pressure to build instead of
Uh-huh.
pushing. You know what I mean?
You're hurrying the top half of the turn
Right.
and not letting the skis engage before you start to try and change direction. And in that short radius turn, as you go from one set of edges to the other through the transition, there is going to be a small amount of change the direction in which the skis are pointed. In other words, there's going to be a rotational control piece that enters the picture. Your rotational control in this video is that the skis are changing direction too much before they're engaged with the snow.
Yes.
And that creates a late engagement or a late interaction, you know, and a more Z-shaped turn.
Yeah, 100%. I had to make a lot of fundamental changes.
It's also important to point out in this stuff, you know, there's a difference in the teaching piece and the MA piece. You know, what I'm trying to talk about here is what do I see from the movement analysis perspective that needs to be changed. From the teaching perspective, I have no idea what's going to make this work, right? And that's the piece where you got to figure out what's like, how am I going to convey this idea? But the movement analysis piece doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
I heard an interesting comment from the ski school director over at Steamboat, Nelson, if anybody knows Nelson. But he was talking to me about how about movement analysis. He says, this is what we pay our instructors to do. We pay them to do movement analysis. As we pay them to come up with something that somebody can do so that we can teach them to do something better. I thought that was an interesting comment.
Jim, it's actually really interesting because the higher end people where I'm teaching now always seem to dump at the bottom half of the turn, and it's precisely for that reason. They just don't engage early enough, and they have the confidence to just kind of just smooth it out with a longer bottom half.
I am reading the chats as we go along, Gay, so I'm answering what you have to say.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So there's a number of different questions in the chat that I'm reading. One is about how it's a, you know, is it a common problem? Yeah. I mean, we all know the same thing. You stand at the top of the hill and you point your skis down the hill and you got two choices, you know, turn or die. Those are your options here. So everybody to some degree, I mean, maybe even if you're on the beginner run, you realize that I need to do something to manage where I go, when I go, at the rate that I want to go. I mean, I can't just point my skis down the hill until I run into something. And so we all know that we need to get our skis turned, and we need to manage our rate of descent, right? And it's easier, I think, to believe that if I get my skis turned in opposition to my direction of travel, that I'll have an ability to put the brakes on. And so we do that to some degree. And the idea that I'm going to tip the skis, I'm going to make a very small rotational change, or rotational change, yeah, from edge to edge through the transition, a very small rotational change, right? And then if I engage my edges at that point and shape a rounder turn, somewhere in the future, things will be okay, meaning the latter half of the turn will be fine if I engage in the former half of the turn. It's like, you know, a lady that I've known for 30 years, I taught skiing. She looked at me one day and said, "What if it doesn't work?" I said, "You're going to crash and burn. What do you want me to tell you?" I said, "I know it's going to work, but you got to do it. And if you make the mistake halfway, it might be worse than you didn't do anything in the beginning." But that's, I think, is sometimes what the common problem falls back on, you know. And so the prioritization of what Chuck needs to do is he needs to create more. I mean, the outcome is that he needs to create more interaction before the skis change direction. And it's important. There's a distinction between the skis changing the direction that they're pointed and Chuck changing direction. And I hope that makes sense. The rotational piece is Chuck changes where the skis are pointed, but he hasn't got any change in where he's traveling yet. Right? So if he could have a little bit less of that, make sure the front half of the ski engaged. And this doesn't mean stay a lot forward, just make sure the front enough forward that the front half changes. And engage the skis higher in the arc with the pressure that you're directing to the top half of the turn. You'll start to create a rounder turn there. And I believe that's what the goal is if you're doing short radius turns, you know, from a certification process in Rocky Mountain.
Hey, Jim,
Yes.
with Chuck here, you're saying slow the rotation at the top half of the turn. Would it also be correct to say that he could accomplish that through how he's doing the transition? As I'm watching him, I feel like I see his center of mass moving up in transition, and he can rotate the skis if his center of mass stayed level. You said he's tipping the skis early. If his center of mass stayed level, would there be enough pressure on those edges to prevent the early rotation or the quick rotation at the front half?
I mean, maybe. I'm not discounting that as a possibility. But what I will say is that you don't have to come up to get the skis to lighten. You can use, a retraction down and waiting kind of task and still turn the skis a lot. So do I think it's the coming up and creating a lighter part of it that allows them to turn? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it might assist in what's happening. But I can see how the new inside ski actually comes off the ground. So it gets some pressure towards the skis. And again, I don't necessarily know exactly what is going to make Chuck change. But I also know that you can definitely, this is kind of a teaching question. You can rise up and not change or not increase the rotational component. I mean, just because you come up doesn't mean that you have to turn the skis. You can come up and go in a straight line. So, would that help? Would that trigger it for Chuck? Maybe. I do know there's an inverse relationship between how much the skis are tipped on the edges, right, and how much they'll rotate. So the more they tip, the less easy it is to rotate the skis. And possibly a piece of, one of the questions I see in the chat about is it's a question of dirt, and to some degree, yeah. It's dirt of one thing versus dirt of the other thing. There can be little pieces at times about the rotational component that you're using. So in other words, is he using a whole bunch of upper body rotation to get the skis to turn? you know, he's in a relatively counter relationship through the finish of the turn. You know, watching it right there, is there upper body rotation that takes place versus leg turning that's taking place? I don't think it's a hugely significant factor. You know, I've heard the argument that everybody does it a little bit. That was actually said to me by Jonathan, the guy in the video, Jonathan Ballou. I looked back and I said, "Excuse me," but I don't see that being a significant factor. But what I do see is that I see your legs turning a lot before the edges are, and the skis turning a lot before the skis are tipped on the edge. I mean, if I was trying to get you to change and do this, well, I probably was trying to get you to change and do this. You know, like I
Actually,
said,
you
there was
weren't available that year, so I blame you.
all right. Well, like you said, I would do a lot of outside ski turns. I'd try to get you to pressure the outside ski, but then, you know, try to create an edge engagement before the skis are turned. And if you could get on the little toe side of the uphill ski completely prior to the at the finish of the previous turn, you know, move along the length of the ski, I think you create a situation where the turning of the skis, the rotational component, would come more from the skis turning your leg and less from you turning the skis, the legs turning the skis.
So I'm going to go ahead and interject here just a little bit. This is from a couple of years ago, 2022, I think. And this was before I failed an exam that year. And the real change that really happened was actually I came back. This is like in the spring. I came back that fall, and I had Jim on one side, and I had what's his face from Telluride on the other side, and they were staring at me, and they're like, "All the things that you're saying make sense, Chuck, but you're completely wrong." And they didn't tell me exactly what they should be doing, but they were like, you need to be getting onto the new outside ski as early as humanly possible. And whatever you need to do that. And so it was like, all right, I spent the entire spring, every time I was not teaching, I went back out for an hour and I did nothing but outside ski turns in the bumps, on Basher, everywhere I could. Mostly it was on Alan Phipps, which I think is a great run for that. But it was outside ski turn after outside ski turn after outside ski turn. And the real thing that really made the change for me was the reason why I do what I'm doing here is because my idea of controlling speed was through pushing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't believe the idea of if you can get outside pressure or get pressure to the ski earlier and create that interaction higher in the arc, that you're actually going to create a frictional component high that's going to transfer to the lower part. It just doesn't make sense. No, gravity's that way, right? I need to push against gravity. And gravity is not at the top of the arc, it's at the bottom of the arc. Until I finally felt that piece, I was never going to be changing from what I'm doing there. So it really came down to an understanding. I had to have a completely different understanding of what I needed to do. And after that, I was successful.
All right. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Hey, I do have another question I want to answer. It says about the two parts of the fifth fundamental. It's the regulate the magnitude of pressure. All right, and it's the ski-snow interaction. Those are the two parts that I see. And the part that I pay attention to more than anything else is the ski-snow interaction. But I don't regulate. Sometimes it's a viewpoint that the regulating the magnitude of pressure, right, is created through flexion and extension movements. And I think most of the time that regulating the magnitude of pressure, right, is created through manipulating the first four fundamentals. That's what we do all the time. We regulate the magnitude of pressure and it can happen in any turn through flexion and extension movements, but it happens much more so in terrain and bumps and things like that. However, we can regulate the magnitude of pressure that's created through the ski-snow interaction by manipulating the first four fundamentals, and that can happen on every turn. It does happen on every turn, whether we're doing it intentionally or unintentionally. It does happen on every turn that we make. Right, and that's how I see those two sides. That's why I said I kind of harp on the ski-snow interaction piece, because I think it's sort of the lost part of that, and that's, again, that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at skiers, is what's the interaction, and what do I need to do to change that interaction so that they get a more desirable outcome.
There was also a really good question from Scott about how would you explain the fifth fundamental to first year or level one candidates? Because that's difficult. Because remember, everything that you say to them is exploding their brains.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you what inspired that question is that I don't feel like I dived into the fifth fundamental until, maybe started getting into it around working towards level 3. But it was really in the last year where I felt like, as I was working towards trainer, that I really started to understand it better. That I feel like a lot of us will train our level 1, 2 candidates and gloss over the fifth fundamental, maybe due to the lack of a universal understanding of it. But I think it'd just be really exciting to send level 1 candidates with an understanding of the fifth fundamental and not delaying that process. Like, I may be kind of experienced in my own development.
Yeah, without getting them stuck on that piece, right? Because they really have to focus on the four, but how does that interact with the other ones? That's kind of we're leading on you. We're leading on your AI, Jim.
So I'm curious
Actually,
how we do that and if we would really do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I read that question in the chat, and I was probably pretty close to saying something about it. The idea, if you've read in the skiing teaching snow sports manual, the last one that came out, there's a section in there about copy, choose, create, and that's a thought. I think I actually got credit for that. Myself and Jennifer Metz got credit for that. Although we both pointed and said, I thought that was your idea. But anyway, the reason I say that is it's a kind of an idea about how people teach and how people learn. The first thing that you do, like when you're teaching beginners, right, is you show them something and they try to copy that, right? And as they get more ideas, and I think when I say more ideas, they get a second idea. Now they have to choose. Like it could be a second idea to do the same thing, or it could be another thing that's happening. It's like, when do I stop doing one and starting doing the next? And I start to choose things, and then the create thing comes, and I don't think that we create on a really frequent basis, but the creative piece is, how am I going to put these pieces together? Right. And I'm bringing this part up because this is what strikes me, Scott, in your question, is how do I get level 1 trainees to do this? In the beginning, when we teach new hire instructors to be instructors, we give them a roadmap. We give them a step-by-step thing. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to get your beginner. The first thing you're going to do is your boot work. Then you're going to do 1 ski, you do 2 skis. You're going to walk around the flats. You're going to do this, this whole step-by-step thing. And, I've looked at supervisors at Winter Park when they said, hey, we got some new hires. They're going to tag your beginner lesson. And I always look back and I go, are you sure that's a good idea? Because I'm not going to follow the progression that you gave them. I'm going to go into that choose and create mode where I'm just going to pick the things these people need to do when they need to do. That age-old things about, you had 2 12-year-old kids that showed up at your lesson. They're hockey players. It's like, what'd you do? It's like, I don't know. We skated for a minute and got on the lift. And then you had the 45-year-old couple from the Gulf Coast who said it's on our bucket list, and what did you do? It's like, well, we didn't make it to the lift. It's like we did radically different things depending on who they were. So my answer to the trainees part is they want something to copy, but at the same time, and this is my belief, is that I think the ideas can be introduced, the rate at which they're going to absorb the ideas. You know, I don't know the answer to that question. You know, and can it be introduced to level 1 trainees in that can they feel like if they start down the hill and you have them do a straight run, you know, they're going to feel the undulations in terrain, the little ripples in the snow and the bumps and things like that. And then you're going to have them move into a wedge, for instance. Even if it's a direct parallel, the same thing works. You're going to have them move into a wedge. It's like, what do you experience when you move the skis from straight to a wedge? And it's like you start to feel the snow push back against your skis. Right? That's what slows you down. Right? What makes you turn one way or the other in the wedge is the fact that the difference between the pressure on one ski and the pressure on the other ski, the ski that has more pressure being pushed back, more of the snow pushing back against it, determines where you're going to go, which happens to be the one that's on the opposite side of the direction you're going to travel in. I got that right, didn't I, David? You're the engineer.
Yes,
but that's
Jim, that is correct. Yep, you got it.
That's what's making you turn. So level 1 trainees can feel that the ski snow interaction and the pressure that's building is what's causing these things to happen, right? But the important piece in that beginning, and if you want to keep your job as a trainer, Scott, you know, is Bert's going to look back at you and go, I don't give a damn if they know that, Scott. They got to be able to teach beginners. So in other words, they have to have something to copy and a step-by-step process to go through and everything else. The fact that they understand what's making these things happen, that it may be the 5th fundamental, doesn't mean that I have the right to ignore the other 4 fundamentals. How are we going to apply the other things that are going to create that interaction that we're looking for? But yes, I do believe that instructors can be introduced to these ideas way before they are, you know, and I know in the Rocky Mountain region, you know, that I know because I'm an examiner, you know, the frequency with which that interaction piece is addressed in candidates at level 3 and level 2, I think is absurdly low. I think it can be addressed much more. And I would also say that, you know, if you have to pick 2 fundamentals to work with, which you do in the way that our assessment has worked for years at level 3, two fundamentals to interact or you have to work with. It's like I could pick one fundamental and the 5th fundamental all day long, every time. You know, I don't have to figure out which one I'm going to work with. It's like just pick the one you see and then add in the interaction piece. You know, the ski snow interaction piece, and that would work every time. Because there's always a ski snow interaction. Right? It may not be the one you want, but there's always one. Sometimes it's what is the one you want. Right? So that's how I would get to it. Matter of fact, it's probably how I do get to it. Try to get people to pay attention to that piece. Right? And it also for those newer level 1 candidate, level 1 trainees, you know, when they're doing this, it does give the why and the validity behind why you're asking them to turn their legs, why you're asking them to tip their feet and legs more than they tip their whole body. You know, why am I asking you to move along the length of the ski? You know, why am I asking you to move to the outside ski more than the inside ski? All because of that interaction piece, because it's going to give you a more effective interaction and a more effective way to help people get the desired outcome.
So would it
I
be
think we're
fair
pretty
enough?
successful at giving people something to copy with the other 4 fundamentals.
Uh-huh.
And that's maybe something as a trainer we have to kind of reflect on. And what do we give them to copy when we introduce the 5th? So I think it's kind of different because the 5th fundamental involves us having to create movements to
would it be
kind of
fair
create that force, to create that interaction. We can't really experience the 5th fundamental in like a static exercise with bow ties or with you know, rolling the ankles to tip the boots on edge.
But I think you can, but it's more in that flexion and extension piece. You know, but just up and down movements, like jumping up and down, can have you create a overall pressure management kind of thing, a magnitude of pressure. but that's only one aspect of that. And I think it's the aspect that is remembered or seen all the time. The aspect of it from the interaction piece is not the piece that's in the forefront of people's minds. And that's the part, I think that's the reason Chuck asked me to come and, and do this, is that's the part that I pay attention to. I fully understand the flexion and extension piece and things like bumps and everything else. And the ability, it's like if you're getting a lot of pressure at the end of the turn, it's like, yeah, you can flex and do a retraction kind of move to help absorb some of that. Again, Scott, I'm going back to you, but you ski at Taos, it's like, oh yeah, flexion and extension just to absorb stuff in one of those chutes is pretty important. Your ability to do that. And that's not the interaction piece as much as just the snow pushing straight back against you because of something else, like a bump or whatever it is. But the other pieces can also be used to affect that, and the other 4 fundamentals. And that's the part that I think is neglected somewhat.
Would it be fair to say that if you were talking about the 5th fundamental to first year, or that it's really about how the snow is pushing against you? Because that's something that's tangible and verifiable. They can feel it pushing you from one side to the other, right? And then that would be how you would describe it.
I'll give you a task. This would be great because none of you I don't know if anybody in this group is down under right now or in a place where you get to ski. But start on assuming that there's not a lot of contours in the hill. It's just a basic, a pretty straight fall line, groomed run, not even very steep. Start in a straight run, and then see if you can make a left turn on your right edges without turning around. No switch skiing. Start down the hill like this and make a turn that goes this way on these edges. Somebody said to me one time, well, it all depends on what you want to do. You can do whatever you want. And I go, no, you can't make a left turn on your right edges. It doesn't work.
Because you can't get the snow to push you in the right direction.
Well, the snow will push on your skis, but you'll go the other way. You'll go downhill. But it's one of those kind of deals. So, yeah, what we're trying to do is in a sense, we're trying to get the snow to push on us, and we're trying to manage where that happens. That's that interaction piece. So, yeah, I think that level 1 folks, I think all instructors can, and all the people we work with, if they care to work in that direction, they can figure that out. They can relate to that and they can see how that makes sense. But in and of itself, the fact that I want the snow to push on me in a particular way doesn't make it happen, right? Now I got to bring in those other pieces. Like, okay, I got this. I understand what I'm trying to accomplish. How do I do it? It's like through a blend of the other 4 fundamentals and possibly even that whole flexion extension piece of the 5th fundamental.
Any last questions? We've run out of time. Or is everybody cooked? Gay is cooked. Thank you, Jim, very much. This was a real honor, and honestly, this was way better than the last time you did this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've had 4 or 5 years to think about it. But I really, for whatever it's worth, I really mean what I say. It's like this is how I view the skiing. And it's really fun when all of a sudden somebody gives me something that's a new way to view this or to look at it, and something different, and the centerline model that's been revitalized a little bit, and the common threads are interesting because there's some pieces in there that I'm excited about. But yeah, it's like, how do we make this work in such a way that we get the reaction we're looking for? And keep in mind, just as maybe a sort of a last piece, but keep in mind that thing I said about, I don't think that interactions are necessarily right and wrong. Just like I don't think turn shapes are right and wrong. I think the question is the interaction that you've chosen, is it giving you the result or the outcome you're looking for? And if the answer to that question is no, right? But if the answer to the question, like in Chuck's video, if Chuck looked and you were just a recreational skier who was coming down the hill and everything's fine, you might look and go, this is great. I don't need to do anything different. However, you wanted to enter a realm in which people, sorry to say it, we're going to judge you. That's what we do, right? We judge skiers. All of us do that when you teach a lesson. You look at somebody, you judge what they're doing, and you try to make changes to it. All right. But if you're going to go to that realm, it's like, okay, now your outcome, now the things that you're doing are not giving you the outcome that you're looking for. The interaction you're looking for is not what you're after. So here's what you got to do to change that interaction. But that's what we do. There's not a right or wrong to the interaction unless it doesn't meet the outcome you're looking for.
Thank you very much again. So I guess we'll go ahead and end. But I
was fun.
appreciate you coming on, and
Thanks.
this was really, really great. So